Hello and welcome to this week's Fit Finance sessions. And we've delayed our entry this week to keep pace with what Rishi was saying this afternoon. And I think, Henry, you're going to give us a rundown of the sort of things Rishi's been promising. He seems to be following Trump's approach with making borrowing great again. Why don't you give us our thoughts on what he's spending and where it's coming from?
Well, he did. I mean, it was a pretty. Some of the commentary has been quite sobering. Because we're borrowing a lot of money. Um, we're so this year alone we've borrowed 280 billion pounds, which I guess is probably almost as much as Microsoft is worth, just to fund the battle against coronavirus. And I think in total this year we've over 394 billion pounds the country has borrowed in total, just to keep the country going, just to pay the nurses and to fight the coronavirus and build the motorways or whatever else. So it's a staggering sum of money. It's not quite as much as Amazon's worth, I don't think, but even so, it's getting there. Not only that, the economy, so the GDP has contracted by over 11%, which is as worse as it's ever been in 300 years of recording the data. I mean, if I was Rishi Sunak, I'd be pretty disappointed that I got parachuted into this job right now. It's going to be a tough one. And they reckon that by 2025, so we're going to have to continue to borrow over the next 4 or 5 years. So by 2025, the total debt that the country holds will now be up to 97% of GDP. So in other words, all the money the country earns in a year will be the same amount of money that the country owes, which is quite a lot, I'm guessing. Well, I know it is a lot. But having said all that, then Rishi, he's not a mate. I just went to school with him, but he's not a mate. So Rishi then started spending money extraordinarily on various things. So nurses and doctors continue to be paid, which is great, of course. Low-paid public sector workers are also being paid, and various other defence spending has been publicised that's going up. Education, NHS funding as well as a whole is going up, and then other little bits and pieces. So the 4 billion to a levelling up fund to make the North great again, as Boris possibly said at one point. A job restart program, money to help the unemployed get back into work, all sorts of police. And the only thing that actually seemed to be reduced in all of this was a very slight drop in overseas aid spending, which is going down by 0.02% of our GDP. So to be honest, if that covers all that and all this huge amount of debt, then our overseas aid spending must have been a huge sum of money beforehand. But I suspect not. I suspect that trouble lies ahead to repay some of these debts in the future.
Yeah, I think without being too morbid, some of the notes coming through were that because of the excess deaths, the silver lining is that saves us money on pensions in the form of about £600 million worth of payment. So that's back in the coffers if you want to look on the bright side in a very morbid way.
The coffers are not coffins.
And actually, one thing that might affect you if you've got a final salary pension is they're also removing the RPI measure, so that will mean final salary pensions will get slightly less increases and also save us on index-linked debt linked to that index. Tim, anything to add from your side of things?
No, I mean, I think Henry's ticked them all off, really. I mean, the only thing which I wanted to bolt on to that was, of course, if there wasn't already enough spanners in the works, the big spanner with the big B on it Brexit is still kicking about, and just to add to that debt figure of pretty much 100% of GDP, if a no deal comes through, then I saw the debt ratio increased to 128% of GDP. Now, obviously, that's still, I mean, looking like less and less likely. I think it was last week now. I think there was a preliminary deal with Canada, wasn't there? Which had a nice bump off the back to the pound off the back of that. But nevertheless, that's still a possibility, which, I mean, once upon a time was a household conversation, wasn't it? Brexit or dinner table chat, but it's still there, it's still not over. But yeah, no, Henry's nailed them already, but that was the only thing which I wanted to add.
Sorry, Tim.
Sorry.
What about the cost of the debt, Tim? Can you say anything about the cost of the debt?
Cost of the debt? Not bar in relation to the GDP being 128 in total. I don't have the pounds and pence, unfortunately.
I think it's the lowest. As much as all that debt is there, it's costing us as little as it's ever done. So it's not the end of the world. It sounds like big numbers, doesn't it? But I know if money's cheap, then borrow. If it's expensive, don't. Just like anything, mortgage rates are really low, but credit cards are expensive. If the debt's in a way that can be sustained and cheap for us to do so, then far better to spend and use that money to invest back in the economy to get it going. I think to give some other positive news, Goldman Sachs are predicting that the S&P 500 will be at 4,300 in the not too distant future. So I think a lot of this government spending, a lot of the vaccine data, it's all positive news. And with Rishi finding the magical money tree that he's been looking for so long, hopefully all of that will trickle into making more output to be able to pay off these.
I think it'd be really interesting, but if debt is cheap and as debt remains cheap, then perhaps the tax rises don't have to be quite as severe. But I think it is interesting, actually, debt being as cheap as it is, whether or not the opposition have pointed out that borrow more, actually, and use the time now when you can borrow at pretty much nil to invest back into the economy, whether or not that's HS2 and 3. Probably for you chaps up in Rutland, does it go close to you in Rutland? No, it probably goes a little bit further west, doesn't it? But those big infrastructure products, certainly putting in broadband and 5G across the country and all that sort of stuff. Maybe now is the time to be tackling those projects, while still not. And I don't. There's no point, I don't think, or don't see in pushing income tax rates up immediately, certainly in the next budget, because still people are unemployed. They're trying to build back some of the savings that they might have lost in, being furloughed and stuff like that. So sort of pushing down fiscally on people at that time doesn't seem like the right time to be doing it, but actually just giving us all a little bit of a chance to breathe, grow, get back, and get the economy going again. To my mind, it seems like a more prudent way forward, but what do I know?
Mostly wishful thinking, perhaps.
That might be.
Yeah.
I think the austerity over the last 10 years hasn't been as proven. You can't always just cut costs. I think you've got to try and go back to the Keynesian way of spending. A bit of inflation would help with that debt, and more importantly, it's more politically tolerable, isn't it? No one likes austerity, but everyone likes free money. As long as that all works out in the wash in the end, then everything's fine. But I think that gives a good wrap up. If you've got any questions, please leave some comments. And if you're on one of our platforms, please subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.